Okay, here we are, just doing a quick run through refresher for desktop prototyping. So I just whipped up a really quick site just to use as an example for you. So a few things I'm going to go over here, some things that we can do for hovering, our secondary navigation, and also within our headers. So I'm just going to go ahead first and just go over hovering first. So if we say want to add a hover to our text, what we do is we click, go over the right hand side and we component. You can also go over here and make it a component. You can also right click and make it a component. Lots of ways. Oops, my mouse is moving. Lots of ways you can do that. Oh my goodness. So we've got our default state. We click and we're going to make our hover state. So if our hover state, we want to maybe change the font from a semi-bold. My gosh, my mouse is really being funny today. To a bold, and let's say we want to add a darker tone to it. I always like to add those colors in over here so we have a quick reference. So sometimes these components can act a bit funny, so just make sure you just do a quick through here, click through, and those seem to be working great. So we just do the same thing. So again, we can right click, make a component, and then we double click to be able to change the how we want that to look. Oh my goodness, something is not working right. For our fill, we're going to make it that. And then again, oops, looks like I adjusted the wrong one. So now we'll just go back to our default, double click to get into the characters. And then again, always just a nice quick click through. Looks like that deleted it. That's that funny stuff I was talking about, how those funny things can happen sometimes. When you change one, it accidentally adjusts the other. All right, let's see if that worked now. Default hover. All righty, here we go. One more, we're going to make it a component, and then we add our hover. So we got default, click back to hover again, double click. See if this is, oh, there we go. And then we're going to make it that bold color. So click away, and then we got default, bold, or default hover. Always stay on your default. So when you're testing, you know that default is what's going to be appearing as you're landing. So as we kind of mentioned previously, when we are prototyping, we will just go and connect these down to where we need them to be. When you see this, this just means that there's a hover. If you hover over it, it'll tell you. But what I did want to go over is if we wanted to have a secondary navigation. Please note on these sites or on these examples, this isn't exactly what it should be. I'm just whipping this up. So I'm not saying you need to have a secondary navigation. I'm not saying this is the whole website. Obviously, I'm missing lots of pieces. It's just tutorial purposes only. So we've set these all up as a hover to change their look and feel. But what if we want to add a secondary navigation that pops up on a hover? So I went ahead and I added a few little elements here that we would potentially use as as an example for a secondary navigation. First thing I did want to note, these are all grouped, is especially if you're going to be anchoring these to different sections, you want to make sure that they're in their own text box. That's first and foremost. Then I'm going to grab all those suckers and I'm going to Command G and I'm going to group. And then I'm going to get that in that exact spot that I need it to be, always making sure we're nice and aligned. And now I'm going to grab my secondary nav with my main nav, and I'm going to group that again. So not to worry, your component is still safe there. I'll show you how it does appear once you prototype. It is a tiny bit glitchy sometimes, but you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to now make this whole piece another component. So we have a component within a component. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add that. I should be naming these. These should be better so we can services secondary. So it's quick and easy to find. So I apologize, I didn't name those previously. So again, we have our default, and then let's add that hover. So our default state, we obviously don't want these to show. So what we're going to do in our default state, we're just going to click, and because these are all grouped, it's nice and easy. I can just click that off. So now we have a default, and then our hover state looks like those disappeared. And then there it is again. So we got default and hover, default and hover. Let's put it back to the default state, and I'm going to just do a quick test because it's easy. So our hovers work. So our hover works, but now when we hover, it doesn't exactly turn our secondary navigation on because we do have two components in here. But when you do click or hover below, it does activate that secondary navigation. That's what I'm saying. There's kind of only so many things you can do in prototyping. That's kind of one of them. But for purposes of our prototyping, I am happy with that. So now what we want to do is if we want to anchor down into those sections, I'm going to go back to our hover state. I'm going to have to double click a couple times. Oh, back into our prototyping. So here we go. Now we're going to add that little arm. We want it to scroll to, and now I get to put my destination, move in and move out. Oops. There, choose our destination. We've got laundry and ironing. Commercial cleaning. Last but not least, organizing. Okay, and then you can also add hovers to those. I don't need to go over that. Again, we just end up with components within components within components sometimes. Making sure our design, head back to the default state to start. Press play. Laundry, beautiful. Okay. So that's how we would do our secondary navigation. We don't need to set up separate pages for that second navigation. We do things all through components. Last thing I want to go over, but certainly not least, is if we are in this site and we start scrolling through, we actually immediately lose our navigation, as you just saw a second ago when we were testing these out. Now I got to scroll back to the top. So what we want to do is we want to freeze our header. So I personally like to keep a bit of a color wash, so a bit of a transparency behind my navigation. So this way, when it's scrolling through, there is always something sitting behind it, so it does stay visible. So what we do want to do now that we've got everything sorted, I'm going to take all of our bits and pieces here, and I'm going to Command G to group them up. And when I'm over in my prototype, I'm going to fix that position when I'm scrolling. So now let's give that a test. And there we go. So now that follows us where we are going. I can keep. Oh, it looks like I didn't program tips quite yet. And one of those. We're going to scroll to tips, add an extra one of those. And again, if you click and nothing seems to be happening, if you just continue to click, kind of do that double click motion. There we go. That'll happen. Okay. So that's that, folks. Again, circling back to that mobile, I know that's not ideal, but not to worry when you're actually doing your prototyping, just leave it as is. There's a few tips to prototype within our navigation. Again, be sure to add that freeze at the top because it is always key. And have fun. Let me know if you have any questions.